introduce you Miss Maria Spies, our expert of today. Maria is co-founder and co-CEO of Holon IQ. Holon IQ is a global education market intelligence platform. Maria was the head of digital learning futures for a $40 million corporate venture fund and innovation arm of a global education company. In this role, Maria worked with edtech startups and founders around the world to support their growth and led research projects about the future of learning, such as global edtech landscape and higher education digital transformation. As the global head of learning and teaching services for a global education company, Maria built and led global innovation teams, driving innovation in curriculum, teaching, and student experience in over 50 countries. Thank you, Maria, to be with us here today. The floor is yours. Enjoy the presentation, dear participants.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. And I'm going to give you all a wave. It's great to be in this very interesting conference, and I hope that your discussions in the roundtables went well. Thanks for that introduction as well. My name's Maria Spies, as I was introduced. The presentation today is going to focus on what the future might look like, what's happening right now in the world of education innovation, and where that world might head. I mean, even this conference is a great example of where things might be heading. And so firstly, Holon IQ is a market intelligence platform. That's what we do. And so we take a lot of data and information about things that are happening all around the world and put them together to identify the patterns. Let's just start very quickly with the size and shape and drivers of global education. Firstly, one of the things to know about education is that it's a huge market. You are all experts in this area already, of course, but you can see that besides the global education market, that is all spending, government spending, parent spending, company spending, individual spending, a couple of years ago, and it's a $6 trillion industry moving to $7 or nearly $8 trillion. You can see in the donut shapes there, higher education is in the green, and corporate training is in the blue. And you can see from between 2018 and 2025, there's a change in shape there. And what we're seeing, this is a really interesting trend of less formal long-form education in post-secondary and more informal short courses. Probably this is not a surprise to you, but people are now moving to shorter forms of learning after school in post-secondary. Move on. One of the key things around that are driving the shape of global education is the population changes. Actually, between now and 2050, there will be 2 billion more learners in the world. The vast majority of those will be secondary school learners. But you can see even in the blue, lots of post-secondary, that's university or other further education. And so the question is, will our current forms of education, the way in which we currently organise teaching, learning in schools and universities and so on, be able to actually cope with that volume if we in fact want to teach, we want to have all those people to have access to education, which of course we do. How is the current structure of education going to cope with that? Even right at the very beginning of COVID, we asked global education leaders about what was happening for them in terms of disruption. Even before COVID really hit, people were expecting disruption. Almost 85% of these education leaders expected disruption in their part of the industry before 2025. So people have been waiting for this for quite some time, and COVID has really accelerated this sort of disruption. These graphs show the change in percentage of the proportion of learning that will be done through one's life. The graph on the left shows that 2018, something like 80-something% of one's learning in a lifetime will occur before the age of 21. And then on the right-hand side, by 2040, they're expecting that proportion to go down to something like 50%. Again, supports the notion that people are continuing to learn over a lifetime rather than front-loading a lot of education. But what does that mean for universities? The other major trend, of course, is changing world of work. This graph shows that 2027, this is a pre-COVID graph, 2027 was the year predicted for more US workers to be freelance than in full-time jobs. That is an amazing statistic and really even accelerated through COVID. So all those changes are happening in the world. What's happening in the world of education, the impact of that? One of the key things that we've been tracking is the digitisation of education, especially higher education. And this is a framework where we've been tracking digital capabilities in each part of the student life cycle. The purple, the pink on the left is demand and discovery, finding students, nurturing students, enrolling students, learning design, learning experience, learner experience through their time, and then through to work and lifelong learning. And, you know, we have been looking at where and surveying students, surveying universities about where they think their capabilities are in this area, what's important to them. And, you know, the learning design and learning experience are coming up as the most important areas for universities to focus on when it comes to digital. Most universities around the world are definitely looking at how they can build their capabilities across the whole life cycle. The other thing that's really happening is that universities around the world are partnering with private companies to support their digital growth, essentially. And so this graph shows the number of university partnerships with private companies for online learning, that's OPM partners, or bootcamp, the short course partners, or pathways as well for international students. You can see what's been happening there across from 2017, but look at 2020, that growth is massive, and it's not even the end of the year yet. So we're seeing the results of some of these changes are university and public-private partnerships. The other thing that we did do was recast our sizing for global education. What we're going to see, what we're planning to see, what we expect to see is a tuition deflation in higher education. As you know, in some parts of the world, there are the higher education is hugely expensive, and we expect to see deflation in that area, and we expect to see faster, cheaper alternatives growing. So it's a reshaping, recasting of the global education market. The other thing that, of course, has been happening is a lot of venture capital money, private money, moving into technology-related education. And this chart shows the growth of private money that's moving into education to support technology. And, you know, the red is China, the green is India, and the blue is the US. So they're the three major markets where there's lots of venture capital money supporting ed tech and new forms of technology-led learning, and especially in those short courses I was talking about before. Where might all these things be heading? And that's one of the big questions. What might be the shape of education in the future? A couple of years ago, we undertook a fair bit of work and research into identifying 5 potential future scenarios. And what this graphic shows is on the right-hand side, there's lots of dots. As you can see, it's a network diagram. Each one of those dots is a research article, a journal article, a newspaper, opinion piece. And the keywords we used, and this is a natural language processing to find all these, is about 10,000 articles all up. The keywords we used were future of education. So we then analysed the text of all these papers to identify patterns about what was the world saying about the future of education. It was super interesting, and what came out of that, what fell out of that really was 5 key areas, which we built into scenarios to start thinking about how the world might unfold in terms of education. One of those was education as usual. That says what it is. Things don't really change too much. The second one was people were talking about the fact that actually education is going to be more regionally based, and we'll see collaboration and cooperation between regions. We're already seeing that in many regions of the world. The ASEAN region, for example, just recently launched an ASEAN Vocational Education Network, and that is for mutual recognition of vocational education. Global Giants was another scenario that fell out of that, and global giants being big tech companies mostly who actually enter into education and start delivering at a very globalized scale. Again, the Googles and Microsofts and Tencents of the world are doing a lot of this already. The fourth one was peer-to-peer, where really those with expertise and those who needed learning connected up through peer-to-peer platforms. Blockchain is a really great example of how that can be supported. Peer-to-peer is a very popular scenario. And finally, robo-revolution, which is where artificial intelligence continues its development. And we see a lot more sort of automated and personalised, based on algorithms, type of learning. And again, we see a lot of this happening. So these scenarios are not meant to predict the future, of course, but they can help start to think about the different shapes, the way in which education might unfold, or the education industry. And I guess you'll be getting these slides, and there's more details. There's also a website, which I'll go through in a minute. We went around the world for 2 years, and we've asked thousands of people, which scenario would you prefer? These were preferences. This is very interesting. And so you can see the flags there, the different countries. Nobody really is super interested in education as usual. This is all pre-COVID, by the way. Most of the audiences, and to be fair, most of our audiences are those people interested in education innovation, so they're already biased to that. But education as usual wasn't too popular. Regional rising, there were some in some countries that thought regional rising was their preference. Global giants was not very popular at all, with the exception of China, where 21% of the audiences were interested in it. France is super not interested in global giants. Peer-to-peer was the scenario that most people thought they would prefer if they had to choose between those. And that is where, it's really a very human-to-human type of scenario. And I think that says a lot about the way in which people underneath really like to see and like to experience learning, which is with other humans, of course. And then robo-revolution, finally, which is a very tech-enabled, AI-enabled, and again, relatively popular in some parts of the world. China, as a good example, even 30% in Germany and the US. But really, peer-to-peer was the most popular scenario for the future. And finally, we're running short on time today, so this is a quick presentation. But if you would like to learn more, there's some information there. Please feel free to take a snapshot of that slide, and you can find out more about the scenarios. There's a whole website for that, and the framework as well, and other things. So I'd like to open the floor for questions. If you have a question or you'd like to make a comment, please go ahead and put up your hand, and we'll see if we can manage questions here.